Senator Patricia Torres Ray hosted the hearing that discussed some of the impacts of LGA cuts to the Minneapolis Fire Department. She's here now to talk a little bit about that hearing and some of the broader impacts of LGA. Senator, thanks for joining us on Capitol Report.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Let's begin with the hearing that, again, you just hosted, and essentially the testimony from several of the firefighters. They were all in favor of not cutting LGA and of properly staffing fire and rescue. So for you, what was the impetus for even calling this hearing, and what conclusion, if any, did you come to by the end of it?
Well, really my intent here was to try to educate the public about what government constitutes, what is government, and at the end of the day, how cuts to government impact people's lives in a very direct way. And so this incident was really an incident that I think was presented an opportunity for me.
The incident meaning the fire?
The fire at the Walker Church, and in which 7 firefighters were injured. And there are several things that can be said about that particular incident, but the conclusion is that very definitely the firefighters felt that they were understaffed and that the situation got out of hand because they did not have enough people to respond. And so I think that people in the public really need to understand what that means and why these budgets have been cut, and why the cities, the city of Minneapolis in particular, my city, is having to respond the way they are responding. And this is happening everywhere, and I think this is just the beginning. Clearly, my city is one of the largest cities in the state of Minnesota, so that's where things happen first when it comes to cuts to the schools, to all multiple hospitals and programs where you have a larger volume of people is where you really begin to really look at the consequences. And I think that was really a good opportunity for me to show the public what this is.
And generally speaking, people in all forms of government agencies, public safety included, they're essentially being asked to do more with less. And during this hearing, Jerry White, who's one of the Minneapolis firefighters, he stated that public safety should not be held to the do more with less standard. So in this era, Senator, of streamlining and holding all agencies and departments essentially accountable for their budgets, would you say that public safety should be held to that standard? Or do you think that again, as the testifier said, it should not be held to the do more with less standard?
Absolutely not. It should be. We're beginning this conversation right now. I think these incidents are serving, as I said, as an opportunity to really look at how we fund local communities and local programs. There are certain things that, in my view, we definitely, and in the view of the public and every constituent that you ask, that we should fund. Nobody should be put into a situation where, you call because there is a fire in your house and people will say, well, your city did not receive proper funding, so we don't have firefighters available to you. Or, if somebody calls for an emergency, call 911. You cannot tell a person that is dying, well, your city did not receive enough, funding for LGA, therefore we don't have a person available to you. It's a human right, is really a right that individuals who live in the wealthiest nation of this planet are entitled to. So today we're asking the question, are we using our political campaigns, our political views, to really reduce that access to that right? I believe that that is wrong. I believe that we do continue to live in the wealthiest nation of this planet, and you have seen the profits of larger corporations, people who are making a lot of money, the 1% who's making a lot of money, and the 99%, which my constituents who are firefighters were victims of, who are not able to perform their job and may lose their lives. I think that is really a contrast that we need to see and that we're living every day in our country today, and it's unfair. So today, I think as elected officials, we're called to figure out how do we resolve that problem for our constituents. So giving local aid to the cities to struggle to figure out who do they fund, the hospital, the firefighters, the police station, how do we use the money that is so restricted that we don't have enough. maybe we need to think about, probably, the firefighters said that we probably have to allocate funding for those specific programs in a formula base so that every city will have enough resources to respond. Well, maybe we have to do that so we truly see what is the cost of government and the responsibility that the state has towards people in general, not just people who have money, who live in areas where they can pay high property taxes. So, do a person in Edina is more entitled to that, receive that service in a proper way than a person who lives in a small city in rural Minnesota? The answer is no.
I'd like to get your thoughts on a comment that was in a MinnPost article on January 10th. Co-chair of the LGA study group, Representative Linda Runbeck, stated, "I see LGA has been a crutch, and all it's done is make it easy to increase expenditures when they can." Do you think there's some validity to that statement?
I do not. I do not, and this is why, if we need to review the formula today, and we need to figure out that indeed that is a crutch because, the cities are being funded properly and they are receiving, well, let's figure out really who has enough money to respond, to public safety calls. I don't think that there is, and the intent here was kind of to serve as that crutch for the cities that do not have enough revenue, for the cities that do not have the affluent families, the larger homes that can pay these kind of property taxes that are necessary to function. Mm-hmm. That was really, so it was to balance really the lifestyle of those individuals who live in affluent communities versus those that don't. That is what has been really the history of this state, and we need to maintain that. Well, if people argue, that those cities that have low-income families, low-income individuals, that have small homes are really receiving too much, well, let's do a state, appropriation, and let's give them those direct appropriations, that revenue directly to them, so that they can provide services directly to their constituents.
So, Senator, my last question for you then is, we do speak with Senator Roger Chamberlain. He'll be on a bit later in the program, but he said essentially this working group, the first thing that they've had to do is try to come to an agreement on what constitutes a need versus, mm-hmm. say, a want. Mm-hmm. What would you say qualifies as a need?
Well, that has been, the history of this funding, really trying to define what need actually is. And I think that we need to move on beyond that need into a service. When you really define, when you call and a person needs to receive a response to the 911 call, do we call that a need? That is a response that a city has an obligation to respond to. That has a cost, and whether we put that at a higher value because it's in a city that is a larger city where you have a need for more individuals to respond because of the distances or whatever it is, maybe you can work out a formula for the cost of the response and for the cost of that service that you have to provide. But so I think from a kind of a perspective of mathematical perspective, it is easy to say, how many residents, what is really the need in terms of services that you need to provide to those residents, and what is the cost in that locality to respond. Well, that's what it is provided. It seems to me that we're moving into a situation where the state needs to provide that direct payment for that service that is provided, and that service cannot be different. As I said, it cannot be different in Edina, in Rochester, in Homestead. It cannot be different. It has to be the same service because it's the same individual with the same right. And so I don't think that calculating that is very difficult. I think that politics is what is complicating this equation here. It is politics. It is our lack of accountability towards our constituents and deciding that there are some people in the state of Minnesota who have enough money to pay and have the means to pay for that individual that has not that does not have the resources. So the person that has the affluent home does not have a greater right than the individual that doesn't have the resources. They have an equal right, and we just need to calculate it.
Okay,
I don't think it's that complicated.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I want to thank you for bringing the conversation to the Capitol Report set. We certainly appreciate it.
Thank you so much.